First of all, today's Sunday, and it's Gimel Sivan. And you know, probably, we talk about this probably every year, that each day, so we don't say Tachanun from Rosh Chodesh Sivan till Yud Beis Sivan, you know this, right? So Shavuos is going to be Wednesday and Thursday. So Friday, Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we're not going to say Tachanun till Yud Beis Sivan, because it's Yemei Tashlumin of Shavuos, and it begins from Rosh Chodesh. So the Rebbe has a Sicha where he discusses a Maisa with Tur, with the Alter Rebbe. Bottom line is, the Alter Rebbe holds that the reason we don't say Tachanun in the days leading up to Shavuos is because every day is a different Yom Tov. It's a different Yom Tov. Rosh Chodesh even, first of all, you wouldn't say Tachanun because it's Rosh Chodesh, but in addition, you don't say Tachanun because it's the day of Ish Echad Belev Echad Le'omalu V'Le'midi B'Shem Chol Shad Orcha De'erad Den Hasina. Yesterday, Shabbos, it's called Yom HaMiyuchas, the day of our Yichus. That's the day that the Eibishter said you'll be Mamlechas Keyanim and Gei Kodesh and Segula. Right? Segula means a treasure. That's the word. Segula means a treasure. Eitzer Chaviv. The terms of our becoming Miyuchas, the Eibishter's Yichus, is that we, Im Shameh Tishma V'Keli, will do what the Eibishter wants, and the Eibishter is going to make us Miyuchas. This happened yesterday. So Moshe Rabbeinu got the instructions, and he came to discuss it. It was a negotiation, it was a contract. Oh, do we agree? So we agreed. Today we agreed. So, yesterday the Eibishter told Moshe Rabbeinu the terms. It actually holds that Moshe Rabbeinu only went up early in the morning. I think that the Ramban cannot agree with this, but I don't want to go into it. According to Rashi, Moshe's minig was he only went up once a day, fatog, early. And once he came down, he wouldn't go up a second time. So the following morning, which would be this morning, he went back up and told the Eibishter that we agreed. Of course, it actually says, Limdo Teira Derech Eretz. The Eibishter knew that we agreed. Nevertheless, Moshe Rabbeinu came and informed him. So now that Moshe told the Eibishter that the Yidden agreed to the terms, so the Eibishter said, okay, go down and put up fences. This is called Yemei HaGebola, fences. But you see, there's two very important things. Today and tomorrow are very different. Because there was a plan A and there was a plan B. The idea was that they're going to put up fences, and Yidden are going to be outside the fence. Moshe is going to be inside the fence, and Hashem is going to talk only to Moshe. It says in Chumash, Hine enechi boi elecha ba'av ha'onon ba'avur yishma ha'on b'dabri imach v'gam b'cho ya'aminu la'elam. That's how the Rambam explains it. That the Yidden are going to be witnesses, they're going to be edis, they're going to be witnesses that Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu, but they're not going to hear the conversation. They're just going to be witnesses. So the Yidden have to be outside. The Yidden are not Nevi'im, Yidden are not pure, Yidden are not holy, Yidden are not Perushim. They don't go to the mikveh. So Yidden are outside, Moshe Rabbeinu was inside, and the Yidden get from the Eibishter through the Navi, through the prophet. Now understand, if this is the way it had been then, this is the way it would stay forever, that there's a Yid, a Navi, a prophet, who talks to the Eibishter, and he comes and he gives them Dvar Havaya. Moshe comes down today, which is Gimel Sivan. That year was a Wednesday, today it's a Sunday. And he tells the Yid what the Eibishter said, and the Yid should no deal, no way. If we're discussing business with the Eibishter is going to have to talk to us. No in-betweens. Now Moshe thought that was a cool idea, but to be very frank, it was not a very practical idea. That every Yid, Am Hashem Nevi'im, it says in Parashat Baleischa, Kol Am Hashem Nevi'im, the whole Klal Yisrael should be Nevi'im, is not Pashat. But this is what they were negotiating for. The Jews didn't know what they were getting themselves into. So they tell Moshe Rabbeinu, the famous words that we always say, it's Eineinu Liris Es Malkeinu. If Hashem is making a deal with us, He's going to tell it to us directly. Moshe thought it was cool. Moshe had no problem, because it was Moshe Rabbeinu. So he climbs back up the mountain tomorrow morning, which was Dalet Zim, and he excitedly tells the Eibishter that the Jewish people want a direct communication. So the Eibishter gives him a new mitzvah. This is tomorrow. Mitzvah's Pishus. Pishus means not that Yidden should stay outside of the realm of holiness because they're unholy. They should be inside the realm of holiness because they should halify themselves. They should make themselves holy. Perush. And of course, this is what happens. It takes 3 days. So the Matan Torah is pushed off till Shabbos, etc., etc., etc. The end of the story, I don't want to tell you the story today, it's not for today, but the end of the story is that they got what they wanted, and you know what happened next? I'll tell you what happened. The machine ran out quick. They expired. You know, you have medicine, you get the package of medicine, expires in this and this date. You usually get a couple of years. A container of milk, it expires in a couple of weeks. They expired in 5 minutes. 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, 9 times, 10 times. And after they expired 10 times, they came to Mesha Rabbi. You know what? Maybe we should go back to plan A, huh? Maybe we should go back to the first plan. The Eibishter will talk to you, and we'll listen to you. Moshe was so disappointed. Moshe was so disappointed. Moshe was so disappointed. He was thinking, Am Hashem Nevi'im, now they're chickening out. Why? What's the big deal? They expired. They expired. That's a very big deal to expire, yeah? So he comes back to the Eibishter reluctantly now, after the fact, post Aseret HaDibros, and he says the Yidden they're talking their way down from Prishas. They want to go back to Agbola. Make a fence. They'll be on the outside. You'll be on the inside. And the Eibishter says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Heitivu was asher dibeiru. They're right and you're wrong. It has to be this way. There's only one Navi. And the Navi is inside the Eibishter's Rishus. And everybody else is outside that Rishus. So, Apipashtas, why are they outside that Rishus? Because they're unworthy and undeserving and unprepared to be inside the Rishus. Because if they're going to be inside the Rishus, there's going to be a very, very frequent event of Parachan Nishmasan, of expiring. But the Pnimius Dika Pshat is, because how do you make a Dida B'tachteinu if you're a Navi? The whole point is that they shouldn't be so inspired. They should be prasta people, like we always discuss. The Rebbe says that the word that Tzibur, which is a community, is the Rosh Tevis, Tzadikim, Beinim, Urishoyim, Bevav Achibur, that a community has to have all types. And that's how you say the Eibishter. Some of us are Nevi'im, and some of us are Chachomim, and some of us are Tmimim, and some of us are Rishoyim. And together we fulfill the Eibishter's Ratzon. You don't think the Eibishter needs Rishoyim? The Eibishter thinks he needs them. V'haraya, he created them. But in the interim, every Yid became a Navi. In other words, even though Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu a first idea, which is Hagabala, that we would be outside the Rishus of Gedush. We wanted Perishus, we wanted to be inside the fence and to become Nevi'im. And then when we became Nevi'im, we discovered we're not ready for it, so we wanted to step back outside the fence. And that's how it remains till Mashiach comes. And when Mashiach comes, it says, "Tak in the pasuk v'nibu b'nechem b'nei seichem." Every Yid is actually going to be a Navi. But for one moment, we all saw God. That's the story. For one moment, we all were prophets. By Aseret HaDibros, Hashem didn't talk to Moshe. Hashem talked to each one of us. So it remains by every Yid, in a tiny way, this inyan that our connection to the Eibishter is not only that we're outside the Rishus of Kedusha, and there's a Navi who's inside the Rishus of Kedusha, who hears and repeats to us the Dvar Havayeh, but on some spiritual level, every Yid has a connection to this idea of a spirit for a Gemara. The Gemara says, Einam Nevi'im, B'nei Nevi'im Heim. The Gemara says, if Jewish people are not prophets, they're descendants of prophets. Are they descending of Nevi'im? In other words, you have a Shayches to an Ifa Nevuah, to Shayches Nifan Edeleki. And again, one of the aspects of this was that we didn't agree that we should be outside the Rishus of Kedusha. We wanted to be inside. And therefore, Matan Torah was pushed off the Pashtus from Thursday to Shabbos. Shavuos would have been on a Thursday. Would have been on a Thursday. Why? Because on Wednesday he put up the fences. The next day would have been Shavuos. But when the Eibishter said, put up the fences, and the Yidden said, we don't like it. And then the Eibishter gave the mitzvahs Prishas. They needed 3 days, so I waited until Shabbos. So it all worked out for the best. B'Shabbos nitna Torah l'kula alma. Anyway, so today is Mitzvahs Hakbala. And the lesson of Mitzvahs Hakbala is you have to have fences. As they say in the culture, it's all good. The culture says it's not all good. There are fences, there are rules, there's a right and there's a wrong, and there's an inside the fence and there's an outside the fence, and there's the way you behave over here. The Eibishter made the world with mechitzas. As they did schaffen the Welt, mechitzas, avdolas. The hippies wanted to break down the walls, and they created a churban. There's supposed to be mechitzas, and this is the lesson of today, that there's walls. And everybody fits in their own space, and instead of wishing you were someplace else and somebody else, be the person the Eibishter made you to be. Go ahead.
When the Rebbe speaks about, as like a proof of the emes of Yiddishkeit, he talks about how a bunch of people witnessed this thing. He's talking about the Aseret HaDibros?
Right. Of course. It's a kuzari. It's a kuzari. This is the kuzari style. These simple ideas, simple, common sense proofs. Now we are learning Tanya with Hashem's help, and we're in the middle of a conversation We are talking about the midas of the nefesh habahamis. We're talking about the measure, the attributes of the animal soul. So 2 weeks ago on Sunday, we did the midas rois of the nefesh habahamis, the negative, the evil attributes of the nefesh habahamis. Last week, the Rebbe said a chidush gadol, that a yid's nefesh habahamis has midas tevis, that the animal soul of a Jew has good attributes. So what did we spend? What was last week's discussion? When you say that the nefesh habahamis of a yid has midas tevis. So in short, the summary, the substance, the essence of we discussed last week is that the nefesh habahamis, the animal soul of a yid, is not only capable of being kind or compassionate. The animal soul of a yid is capable of being kind or compassionate in an altruistic way, in a non-reciprocal way. They study in the study of biology, right? They believe in evolution. So the very, very essence of evolution is selfishness. The very yesod for you existing, rather than the other guy existing, because you were stronger than him and you were tougher than him, so you killed him and you ate him. Very posh. So in other words, the perspective of Chochmas Chitzonius about a physical creation is everything we do is selfish. Everything is for me. A goy can do kindness, you'll see soon, much kindness. But it's always reciprocal, and they're always trying to find, when you see someone do something altruistic, so it's important for them to say that this altruism has to be with a reciprocity. I'm getting something back. It doesn't make sense. It goes against the principles of evolution, that something should do something and it should be thinking only about somebody else. Of course, Taylor disagrees. We don't believe in evolution. We believe the Eibishter created the world. And by a yid, the nefesh habamis, the animal soul of a Jew, the nefesh habamis of a yid, is capable of altruism. In other words, I'm going to do a good deed and there's nothing in it for me. Not I'm doing a kindness that tomorrow you'll do me a kindness. I'm doing a kindness so my children should stay alive. I'm doing a kindness that tomorrow you'll do for me a kindness. I'm doing a kindness because kindness is right. So the nefesh habahamis of a yid, there is good. And the title of the nefesh habahamis, there is good, is that it's an altruistic good. There's no reciprocity, there's no ritual. How does this manifest? So one of the examples, and this again, understand it's very important that we be clear about what the issue is. The issue is we're not talking about the nefesh halakis. We're talking about the nefesh habahamis. And we're saying that the nefesh habahamis has toiv. What is the title? The nefesh habahamis has toiv. It's doing a good thing and there's nothing selfish about it. One of the symptoms of this is the idea that the Alter Rebbe says, Rachmanis and Gemilas Chesed. This is the Rebbe's ha'ora on this. That the nefesh habahamis of a yid has compassion. The nefesh habahamis of a yid has kindness. Why doesn't he mention the third midah of Baishanas? Right? Everybody, the Gemara says that a yid, the ufya shalom azul, the tev of a yid, the see, such hashgacha patas. This morning, I learned the Gemara. This morning, today, I learned the Gemara, where the Gemara says, why did the Eibishter gave Yidden the Torah? Because Yidden are chutz ben yakis, are azim. And if the Eibishter had not given Yidden the Torah, they would destroy the whole world. They're so chutzpahdik, they're so bold, they would destroy everything and everybody. It's like Gemara, I put it bashgacha pratis. It's not a Masechta Shabbos, it's Masechta Beyagar, it's not the Sugya Matan Teda, but bashgacha, yeah, I learned it this morning. When you say that a Yid has good in his animal soul, that does not include bashfulness. Because the animal soul of a Yid is the biggest chutzpahnik on the planet. The most bold, the most arrogant, the most self-assured, the most assertive people in the world. Mitzad the nefesh habamis is a Yid. The Gemara says a Yid is a Baishan. The Gemara says one of the Siman of the Yid is Tznius, is Baishanas. Because Baishanas comes from the nefesh halakis. There is in a Jew bashfulness. There is in a Jew reticence, shyness, but it's from the nefesh halakis. Which midas toivis is from the nefesh habahamis alone, only Rachman Semesolam. And this is something where everybody could see. You look at the world. The Inyan from Toiv, I said this to you last week. The Jewish people taught the world compassion. The Jewish people taught the world kindness. You know the history of the world. In many civilizations, including very modern civilizations, like the Greeks and others, when a baby was born, there were elders who would examine the baby. And if the baby was disfigured, if the baby was in any way retarded, they would take the baby up on a hill and leave it to die. This was normal. This was a regular practice. And a mother could pull her hair out of her head and say, go, Nish, go. Now, I don't understand. They wouldn't kill the baby. They would leave the baby there for the vultures, which is cruel and unnatural. But this is there were many civilizations who had this philosophy of life. Why? If you can't take care of yourself, you don't deserve to live. Kumens again, and they came along with this Midas HaRachmanis. The Eibush made a cripple. You know why? The Eibush made a cripple that we should have an opportunity to bring out goodness from inside of ourselves and help and share and support and love and so on and so forth. Like the Rebbe used to bring the Lashon Kisira Oram B'Kisisei. You see someone without clothing, you put clothing on him. You see someone who's hungry, you feed him. These are Midas, Yiddish Midas. Today, imagine a civilization. Today, in the modern world, the so-called modern world, a baby is born, you say this baby doesn't deserve to live. It's unheard of. So whether people acknowledge it or don't acknowledge it, this is the Midas of Avraham Avinu. That the Eibush to put in Yidden in their Teva. Which is why a Yid who's not at all from has this Teva. That's a mitzvah, you see it. Jews are compassionate and kind. And sometimes when they're misguided, their compassion, their kindness is like the Rebbe said once, HaMischased Machzorim. It's displaced, so they're busy being kind to the cruel. And the Rebbe said, I heard this in a tape recently, that a person who's mischased, imachzorim safe misachzed imachazdonim. If you're kind to cruel, you end up being cruel to the kind. You see this happening in the world today, unfortunately. When they get Eretz Yisrael and the Palestinians. But this is a teva by a Yid. By a Yid, kindness and compassion is in his nature, it's part of his animal soul. And again, the key that you must understand is that since we're learning Chassidus, not Nigla, Midas Tevis doesn't mean I do kindness. Midas Tevis means I do a non-selfish, an altruistic, an ideal kindness. There is nothing in what we call Chesed Shalem, as I'm giving and not to get back. Which leads me to what I wanted to discuss this morning. This idea, what I'm about to share with you today, I'm going to be repeating over the course of the next 10 years as we journey through the Tanya for the third time. Yeah, and his Gals Mashiach to be now, and we'll figure out where we'll sit in Yerushalayim and have our little shir. But this is going to come up again and again and again, and here's the first time that has to be underscored. And that is, I want to discuss with you the word teva. Right, the Alter Rebbe says, what's the expression of the Alter Rebbe? V'gam midas tevis, even good attributes, good midas. Shebeteva kol Yisrael, which is in the nature of every Jew, but till Deson from birth. Like compassion and kindness, boys come from the nefesh habamis. In other words, in the nefesh habamis of a yid, there is room for rachmanis masadim, which is altruistic, though reciprocity. Kibi Yisrael, and the reason is because by a yid nefesh the klipas me klipas nega. Let's stop right over here. I have to talk about the word teva. Now, it's interesting because later on in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is going to use the word teva regarding the nefesh elokis, regarding the godly soul. When we get to that use of the word teva, we'll struggle with it. Okay? But as far as this morning is concerned, you need to understand that the word teva and the word elokus are opposites. The whole idea of elokus is that it doesn't have a teva. What is the meaning of the word teva? What is the meaning of the word nature? What does it mean to have a nature? To use a slightly different word which drives this home quite powerfully, instead of using the word nature, use the word personality. Yeah, there's almost a minyan yidden in this room. Yeah, we're one shy of a minyan. Yeah, we're exactly a minyan. It's not a kosher minyan, but it's a minyan of yidden. And kol be'asara shchinta sharia. The Rebbe brings, why kol be'asara shchinta sharia? Because you have 10 Jews, you have every personality type. There's 10 sugim of yidden. What is the personality? Everybody has different nature. And you can't change that. Everybody has different personalities. Some people are very confident, some people are very happy, some people are very uptight, some people are very competitive, some people are very hardworking, some people are very lazy, some people are pleasure seekers. These are basic personality traits, and they come in groups. Usually when you have one personality type, you have a whole series of personality types that go along with it. You know, the famous Gemara that the Rebbe brings in the Kutatei or Tereir about a Tanya who asked if he has a chelik in Elam Haba, and he said that he once gave tzedakah very generously, And then they told him, after he said they gave tzedakah very generously, they told him there's a chelik in el mabo. Why? Because some people are masmidim, are diligent, like to learn Torah, because it's their teva. If a person is a masmid with a mudei b'tivei, that doesn't get the chelik in el mabo. It has to be breaking your teva. How do you know if a person is a masmid with a mudei, it's b'tivei or not b'tivei? You ask him about other things. A person who's naturally a bookworm, who's naturally diligent, is also naturally frugal, cheap. Those two character traits go together. Kamtsonus and hasmoda. Hasmoda comes from Marash Cheder. His gabas Marash Cheder. A person who likes to study, likes to read books, has a depressed personality, has an introverted personality. They're not generous with their emotions, they're certainly not generous with their wealth. They're very easy to get out. If a person is diligent and generous, something here is unnatural. Either the diligence is unnatural or the generosity is unnatural, because they're opposite character traits. That gets you into El Mabah. That's the pshat in the Gemara. So everybody has a different nature. And the nature or the personality, which is a word which I guess we can relate to in a more psychological way, is fixed. We're stuck. This is what it is. Okay? So we're going to have a conversation about the word teva. This is a standard conversation. This is brought in many Maimorim. And like I said, we'll have this conversation again in Perek Yotes. And this conversation come upon them throughout the time. You can have Perek Ches, which is before Yotes. We're going to have the same conversation about teva. But this is the first time. What is the meaning of the word teva in Chassidus? And the Rebbe brings always a Shal Chuvas Chacham Tzvi that explains the word teva. The first translation of the word teva means nature. The second translation of the word teva is from the word matbeya. But matbeya does not mean a coin. Matbeya means a mint, with which you make many identical copies. You understand? A matbeya means a stamp that's going to stamp 100 coins that should look exactly the same. A matbeya is not the individual coin. The matbeya is the mint that replicates, that makes the same coin, copies of the same coin over and over again, that they're all identical. That's such a matbeya. And the third translation of the word teva that Chassidus brings is from the word tviyah. To be immersed, to be sunk, to be under the water. When a person is drowning, the Hebrew word for drowning is tuvu b'yamsuf, to be immersed. So you have to combine all three words to understand what the word teva means. Teva means a nature that is stamped, like you stamp a coin, it's fixed, and you're stuck in it, you're immersed in it, you find yourself inside of it, you can't get yourself past it. How do you explain this? Or biyur or inyan? So again, these are things that I say over the years repeatedly, the same way, again and again and again. I have no new ways of saying it. So I'm going to repeat, again, over the years we've said this many times. The way the Eibishter made living creatures, this is a physical phenomenon. This is a biological thing. There's two body plans, there's two designs for how the Eibishter made living creatures. One design for living creatures is that they have bones. They have bones. Creatures that have bones hold themselves up. Like you're standing upright because you have muscles, but you're standing upright because the muscles are pulling on the bones that you should stand in a certain position. Your bones hold you up. What is the upside of having bones? That you can bend them. You can bend over. You can be in many different positions, right? You're not fixed in one place because the bones make you flexible. Okay, it's called an endoskeleton. Your skeleton is on the inside. The deepest part of yourself, the most interior level of yourself, allows you to be flexible. This is where your hardness comes from. And there's another huge category of living organs that have what's called an exoskeleton. They have no bones at all. They have no bones. Not a single bone in their body. So what keeps them from plopping down? Yeah? A shell. A hard shell. And of course, most of those creatures live in the water, where it's buoyant, and so the water holds them up. But they have a shell, a hard shell. And they have no bones, they live inside this little shell, and the shell protects them. They're totally inflexible, they cannot bend at all. And if the shell breaks, they die. Finished. There's no flexibility, there's no place to move. The Eibishter made us that our bodies are quite plastic. I mean, you can't bend a person into any shape. You can show break bones, yeah. But a human being has certain flexibility. If you're a mollusk, yeah, if you're a snail, you live inside a shell and do see this. The shell protects you, but the shell is fixed. And what happens if you want to grow and the shell doesn't grow with you? You have a major, major problem. So you have to get rid of the shell and get a new one, which is a very dangerous time. But the way the Eibishter made creatures that have an outer shell, they have no bones, the shell is hard, and the shell is fixed, and if the shell breaks, they die. This is a mashal for a teva, for a nature. A teva means the Eibishter made you a certain way. How did he make you a certain way? He stamped you. You understand? There's a Gemara that everybody knows, because a part of that Gemara is the Mashbiyanei Zeiti Tzadik V'Al Tehirosh. Before a baby is born, there's a malach hamamun al ha'iroyin. There's a malach that oversees pregnancy, and he has a bunch of stamps. Like imagine going to one of those Russian offices. There's a billion different stamps. Fadosash temple, Fayensash temple, and one of them says rich or poor. One of them says smart or stupid. One of them says kinder or cruel. The Gemara goes through all different characteristics, and he fixes it a stempel, like a shell. That's your nature. That's your personality, and you're stuck inside of that. You're stuck inside of that. The way the Eibishter made a person is all a variety of different characteristics, and these characteristics are part of their teva. The Eibishter made them with this kind of tunis hanefesh, and that's it. And of course, a human being deals with his nature, right? And this is what the Gemara says: Hakel b'dei shamayim chutz miyiras shamayim. Everything is the hands of heaven except for fear of heaven. When it comes to fear of heaven, to teva and ra, the Eibishter gives us free will. Otherwise, to a very, very great extent, we're fixed. That's the Taich Teva, a nature. So if you think about it, a nature is a prison. Whatever nature the Eibishter gave me, I cannot exceed. If my nature is to be cruel, you can't blame me for acting out cruelly. Why? I have no control. But the fact of the matter is that a human being who acts out cruelly is punished. Why? Because a human being has free will. The nature may be cruel, but the exercising of the free will, you have choice. A human being has the ability to overcome his nature. Now, what is the basis? What is the source of a human being overcoming his nature? So at least by a yid, it's the neshama. The neshama, the nefesh alakis, is not limited to a teva. And because the neshama is not limited to a teva, you can go against your nature. Your nature says that you shouldn't trust, and the neshama tells you trust. Your nature says that you shouldn't give, and your neshama tells you to give. Your nature tells you that you can't sit still and learn in a sefer because you're hyperactive, and your neshama says, no, you can break your nature. But you see, when you interface, when you bring together your nature and your godly soul, it's not the pshat that the nature changes. The nature is overcome, the nature never changes. The teva is fixed, it's constant. Is there a concept of breaking your nature and changing your nature and getting a teva sheni, a second nature? Sure, there's such a concept. But those are very difficult things. They're not regular avoida. Regular avoida is called in our culture skafia. Whatever your nature is, you don't break it, you don't change it, you suppress it, you control it. But the nefesh habahamis was designed to have a teva. And the teva of your nefesh habahamis is different than her nefesh habahamis, and different than her nefesh habahamis, different than my nefesh habahamis. Every teva is different, right? What did we have on the previous page? One person's teva is eish, so he's going to have an issue of kas and gaiva. Another person's teva is going to be offer, so he's going to have an issue with atzlus and atzlus. Everybody has a different nature. And all of us have the same tayag mitzvahs. How could you give such a diversity of different personalities the same tayag mitzvahs? And the teretisku we're given the neshama. A nefesh alakis, which we're going to learn about the next page. And the neshama, the nefesh alakis says, because you have a certain nature, doesn't mean you have to listen to that nature. But it's not changing the nature, it's overcoming it, you understand? But mitzad ha-teva you cannot change. The nature that the Eibishter gave you, like I said, it says in Mamar Chassidus that a person can break his nature and change his nature. We call that as hapcha. You know where this is discussed? In the Mamarim of Simcha, Samach to Samach, Re'mahuvim. That when a person is an incredibly great madrega of Simcha, their nature changes. That a person who's very cheap suddenly becomes very generous. A person who's very, very, very cruel suddenly becomes very kind. Because excessive joy overcomes the nature. And then comes the shaila in the Maimed, does it only last for the duration of the wedding, or after the wedding is it going to continue? And there's a lot of answers, and one of them, it depends just how happy that person is. Was da madrege for simcha das is. But a yid, the teva doesn't change, you understand? Maybe she gives a teva. The nefesh habahamis, the animal soul has a teva. And the reason we are not limited by our teva as an animal is, which is why we're held accountable for tayag mitzvahs nitna li Yisro, because of the neshama. Now I just want to insert here, and I don't want to be meidich in this, A goy has the same criteria when it comes to his Sheva mitzvahs. A goy also has a teva. Now, goy is from Shalom Trubas at Meis Legamri, don't forget. But the teva of the goy does not force a goy to be even on the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei nech. Otherwise, the goy wouldn't be responsible. And a goy is absolutely responsible because I have rayas from my mother of the Rebbe that a goy has bechira, a goy has reshus or yechelis, freedom. When it comes to Sheva mitzvahs b'nei nech, just like a yid has. So just like by a yid, there's a teva, and the teva is overcome because of the neshama. A nefesh, a goy also has a teva, and the teva is overcome because of whatever kind of nefesh that a goy has that gives him the freedom to do what the Eibishter wants and not do what the Eibishter has not to do, even though it's in his nature. Now this is a bit complicated, and I'm a little bit deceiving you. When we get to chapter 8, you'll see that what I'm saying is not entirely true. The Alter Rebbe discusses that it's impossible that the nature of a person should be against the will of Hashem. In other words, your nature can never be to do an Aveda. By a Yid, the Tayag mitzvahs, and by a Goy, Sheva mitzvahs. But the nature is still a Behema. In other words, even though the nature can't be evil, the nature is still a Behema. We're generalizing now. We're simplifying now. And the generalization and simplification says every person has a nature. You want to call it personality, that's helpful. You can't change that. But you have to deal with it. And a person should never say, because of my nature I have no control, because you have a neshama. Okay, this is the definition of a nature. In other words, based on what I just told you, you should reach another conclusion, another assessment, another conclusion. And the other conclusion is that the word tava and the word klipa are very similar. The word teva and the word klipa are very similar. Why? We discussed klipa a few weeks ago. It was one of the classes that I gave. One of the Sundays was dedicated to translation with klipa. What's such klipa? Klipa means you have a spark of the Eibishter. And the Eibishter is in infinity. The Eibishter is infinite. The Eibishter is freedom. There's no limit. But the Eibishter inside you is covered by a shell or a peel that doesn't let you access that freedom. Something isn't klipa because it has a limit. Something is klipa because of a limit that it cannot change. Right, in the words of the Gemara, Klipa is a prison. I'm stuck in a situation and I cannot get out of it. I can't help myself. That's Klipa. Everything has a spark of the Eibush inside of itself, otherwise it simply would not exist. Right? If you don't have Chayit Eliki, you have no Mitzvahs. Everything that exists has to have a spark of the Eibush inside of itself. What makes Klipa Klipa is that it has no access to that spark, which means it cannot change its Klipa. Teva is the same idea. Teva means the Eibishter gave me a klipa, a shell, a nature, with a series of characteristics that frequently go together in groups. Amara Shcheira, Amara Levena, Amara Yeruka, Amara Aduma, the way these ideas are explained in Chassidus and in Sifrei Musar, and so on. It's my nature, finished. I'm stuck. I have a klipa, I have a shell. So where does free will come in? So again, I'm not going into free will, but because free will is with the neshama. The neshama says you don't have to follow your nature, you can do against your nature. But when you do against your nature, you're breaking it. You're not transforming it. Kommt again the Alter Rebbe don't. It's really a you have a nature. Everybody has a nature. And your nature is your klipa. That's what it is. Your nature is your klipa. What does that mean, your nature is your klipa? You can't change it. This is the way the Eibishter made you. People who are balei taiva b'teva. Right? There's some people who must have pleasure all the time. It's called teva mayim, matzmichem kol minei tainuk. Not everybody is a bal taiva, but some people can't pass up an opportunity to give themselves pleasure. It's a tchunas hanefesh. It's a nature. And other people have a different nature. People are very hot-blooded. They get angry. They get jealous, and so on. These are personality types. You can't change it. Isaiah, the Eibishter made you with a nefesh habahamis. Your nefesh habahamis has a teva. A teva means it's a hard shell that unless you're a tzaddik gomer, you don't break and transform. This is who you are. You're stuck within the parameters of this nature. You're going to have later see this that a yid could serve the Eibishter with his teva. It's called dechil urechim utivim. You have avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, and it's based on your teva. It's the madrega of Elam HaYitzirah. You're serving Hashem with your emotions, but the emotions are not reflecting your creativity and your freedom, they're reflecting your personality. So you're stuck in your teva. So teva and klipa are almost synonyms. Maybe they're exactly synonyms. So your nature is your inhibitor. Your nature is your box. We all have that box. And we cannot change that box. We're going to deal with it. So the Rebbe says, by a Yid, the Teva includes Rachmonos and Glinus Chasadim. It's very important to understand that we're not saying that a Yid has kindness and compassion because he has a neshama. No, that's not a Chiddush. The Chiddush is that kindness and compassion by a Yid is in this nature of his animal soul, like I said before, which is why by Yidden, who have no connection to Kedusha whatsoever, you see these midas. Because it's the Teva of the Behemoth. The Teva means your fixed personality. In the fixed personality of every Yid, in the Klipa of a Yid, in the Teva, in the exoskeleton of a Yiddish Muhus, there's Rachmanas and Milas Chasadim. But why? This is tricky now. Why? Why? Why is it that every Yid, no matter what his Teva is otherwise, has Rachmanas and Milas Chasadim? There's all kinds of Jews, right? All kinds of natures. There's an Eish nature, there's a Ruach nature, there's a Mayim nature, and there's an Afa nature. Which of these four is most likely to be kind? Which of these four is most likely to be compassionate? I don't think it's Afa, right? Let's take Afa off the table, yeah. It's either Mayim or Ruach, right? Mayim or Ruach. Why? I don't care that much. If I don't care that much, you can take something of what I have. So if a person has Teva Ha'esh, a person has Teva Ha'afar, how could you make a statement every Yid in the Teva of his Nefesh HaBahamis, emphasis on the Teva, and of course the meaning of the word Teva is the Klipa, the fixed personality that I cannot change Bepashtus, which is part of my animal system. It's part of my Klipa. How could you say a statement to all Yidden across the board, no matter what their Teva is, in that Teva there's Rachmonas and Gmilas Chasadim? And the answer is because of Klipas Noiga. Sheshbagam came tight. This is very interesting. What is the Rebbe saying here? What is the Rebbe saying? A Yid's Nefesh HaBahamis is Klipa. Right? Translate the word Klipa. A shell. Translate the word Klipa. A hard exterior that you can't, if you break it, it dies. It's fixed, it's stuck, it's unchanging. Right? We all agree that that's the title of the word Teva, that's the word Klipa. There are different kinds of Jews with different kinds of Tivim, different kinds of Klipas. How could you say that all of them have the same Tivim of Rachmanas and Gmilas Chasadim? And the answer is because the shell has leakage. The toiv is not coming from the shell itself. Because the toiv is coming from the shell itself, it depends on the Teva of this Yid, they have a different Yid. Noiga. What does Noiga mean? The shell is porous. The shell lets a little bit of light through. Normally the meaning of a shell is that it's hard and fixed and unchanging. That's what Klipa means. That's what Teva means. When you say that every Yid, whether his Teva is Eish, or his Teva is Afar, or his Teva is Ruach, or his Teva is Mayim, has Rachmanas and Gmilas Chasadim. And by the way, by the same token you say, it doesn't matter what kind of Yid you are, you're an Aspanim. Chutzpahnik, across the board. Which is also interesting. If you're Teva HaMayim, Mayim people just run away from controversy. They're not troublemakers. Leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. But there's another thing. Yisrael Azan Shabumis. When you say about a Yid that has Rachmanas and Gmilas Chasadim in the Teva of his Nefesh HaBahamis, it's a very complicated game. Why? It's in the Teva. The Teva means it's part of his personality, it's part of his nature, he's not working on it, he's not developing it, it's not a refinement of character, it's who he is. But it's in the Teva of every Yid, because it's not from the shell itself, it's not from the Yesod that dominates in that person, whether it's Eish, or Ruach, or Mayim, or Ofar, it's Noyah. In other words, the shell is a little less dense, and some of the Elakus, which is underneath, trickles through. The Elakus which trickles through in the Teva, in the Klipa of the Nefesh HaBahamis of a Yid, expresses itself always in the same two midas. It's not like because my Klipa is from Neiga, so it's less dense, it's a little bit more porous. So a little bit of the Elakus, a little bit of the freedom, a little bit of the infinity percolates through the hard exterior and shows itself in this person that shows itself in Hasmada and Teda, and this person that shows itself in Baishanas, and the third person that shows in Rahman Dain. By every Yid is to say, Rachmanas and Gmilas Chasadim. So this is actually a fancy philosophy class about Midas Tevis. It's a very complex idea. The Alter Rebbe says, understand that we're talking about the Nefesh HaBahamis of a Yid, the animal soul of a Yid. And we're saying that the animal soul of a Yid is Klipa. Klipa means it has a fixed personality, a fixed nature, which is unchanging. You can't do anything about it. This is how God made you. And as human beings, we say that this doesn't take away our free will, it just is this challenge to free will. Only the biggest tzaddikim don't have a teva. Even medium tzaddikim, alachas kama v'kama beinanim, operates through their teva, with their teva, or in spite of their teva. Says the Alter Rebbe, we're talking about the teva, the klipa of the nefesh habahamis, and we're saying that the teva, the klipa of the nefesh habahamis has toiv. Why does it have toiv? Not because of the klipa itself, but because of the noiga. The shell allows some of the oid, what's inside every klipa, which is a lakus, to percolate its surface. But by every year, the oid of kedusha, the oid of ein seif, the oid of freedom, the oid of no teva, that shows itself within the teva of a yid is always the same. It's achmanas v'gemilas chasad. So let's read the words one more time. Yeah? V'ga midas tevis. Also the good character. Page 6. Daf vav amud aleph. It's near the top of the page, mamish. The good midas. Shebet teva, which is in the nature, which is in the klipa, in the shell of kol yisrael, of every yid, but you're born this way. In other words, you did nothing to do this, nothing to deserve this, and so forth. Like compassion and kindness, boys, mimena come from the nefesh habahamis. How could the nefesh habahamis have goodness? Now, if you mean that the nefesh habahamis has goodness, that we call reciprocal, I'll give you $1 today, you'll give me $1 tomorrow, we don't call that goodness. In Pnimius HaTeira, reciprocal goodness is selfishness. And selfishness is ra. So when you say that a yid has in his teva goodness, you're talking dafke chesed shalemis. You're talking dafke altruistic. I'm going to do an act of kindness and compassion. There's nothing in it for me except that this is the right thing to do. And we're saying that by a yid there's this in the teva of his nefesh habamis. Why? Because by yid nefesh do the klipa. This soul comes from klipa. Or to say it differently, this soul is a klipa. This soul has a fixed outer shell, which we call teva, just like a matbeya that stamps a coin. And whatever you put on that coin is stuck on that coin. You can't do anything about it unless you melt the coin and start from the beginning again. This is the teva. It's fixed. Says the Rebbe in Meklipas Nega. It's a Meklipa that lets a little bit of the light shine through. A little bit. Nega is what's underneath the klipa. Underneath the klipa there's a nitzitzilaki. Everything has nitzitzilaki. If an existence is bimti, is extant, and doesn't have a spark of God, then it disappears. It's impossible for something to exist without a godly spark inside of itself. But when the godly spark is blocked and covered over, it's called klip. The nefesh habahamis of a yid has a godly spark, which is also called klip. It's also covered over, but it's noiga. So what's noiga going on? The nitzutz or on the klip? It's a little less dense. That peel is a little less dense. There's a little light through mitzad teva as a part of the nature. And from this, yesh bo gam kein teva also has good. And again, good, the word good means altruistic good, unconditional good, absolute good. And he brings a little Kabbalah for the morning. It's from the secret of the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Let's continue. Let's finish the Pedic. Mashein came as opposed to the animal souls of non-Jews. Of course, this makes everybody nervous. David Duke, the world's greatest anti-Semite, went on his website. He has a whole thing from Tanya. The worst Jews are the Hasidim because of this. We call Goyim. So Mastama, you know the story. Now, Rebbe was sitting in jail. They asked him many questions. Some of them are on the record, some of them are off the record. One of the questions that they presumably asked him off the record was, how come he writes that Goyim come from Sholosh Kibbutz Atmeis Lagamri? So the Alter Rebbe laughed. He didn't answer. He laughed. The interrogator, the one asking the questions, wrote something down on his piece of paper and went to the next question. So they said to the Alter Rebbe later, he asked you a question, you laughed. He should have persisted, especially such a question. Why would he just move on to the next question? So Alter Rebbe said, because he understood that my laugh was saying, you asked me so many questions, and I explained them very well. You really want me to explain to you why you're Sholosh Kibbutz Atmeis, or you'd rather not know? So the guy said, next. You see, but here's the thing you need to understand. When you say that a goy is ra, and it makes everybody nervous, it's so racist, and so on, you must understand that what Tanya is saying, every psychologist in the world says. It's basic anthropology. It's basic evolutionary science. I know these are bad words, But anybody who believes that a human being is an animal believes the same thing. The basic understanding of what a person is, that we exist because we're selfish. If we would not be selfish, a more selfish creature would have eaten our Zaydis up a long time ago. The Chiddush is not that a Goy has no Tov. The Chiddush is that a Yid has Tov. Because we're not talking about Tov in the conventional sense. We're talking about Tov in the absolute sense. Where I'm doing an act of goodness and there's nothing in it for me. This is in the Teva of a Yid. Not in the Teva. Mesha'en kein nefashes umas, as opposed to non-Jews. Hey, Mishar Klippus Meis. They also have a klipa. And what's the Taicha klipa? That there's a spark of God underneath. But it's covered up by a peel, or by a shell, or by a nature which is fixed. But it's Sha'ar Klippus Meis. It's the other severe klipas. In other words, there's no noiga. The shell isn't porous. None of the godliness underneath can surface. You can break the shell. And when you break the shell, you transform it into Kedusha. But if the shell is in place, this shell is dense, it's thicker, it doesn't allow any of the noiga, any of the light underneath to emerge, to percolate, to come to the surface, so it doesn't show itself. And mitzad teva, mitzad klipa, it's impossible that there should be altruism. That's the pshat. She'ein be'em teiv kala has no good on the surface whatsoever. Quote, and this is also a Gemara. Goodness done by non-Jews. The Gemara Avdin is serving themselves. I was once. I knew a Yid. I'm trying to find him now. Now I want to find him. Years ago, I knew a Yid. Complicated story. He was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was a boy. And he comes from Texas. His father had a shaykhis with Gerech Sidim. Maybe his father was even from. He's not from at all. He knows Chabad in a number of different places, in Texas and also in Vermont. He knows Chabad in Vermont. Anyway, so he came to a Yisha once that I did, and I got to know him. We have a kesher, and I can't find him now, but okay. He had a fantastic story. His whole family survived the entire war in Poland in a bunker. And they did a lot of gutsy things. There was somebody who informed on certain relatives that were killed. They went out of that bunker one night, they found those people and killed them. Anyway, he remembers this conversation. He was 4. And his mother suggested to his father, he was the youngest, that they should put a sign on him. They should leave him on the side of the road with a note. This is a Jewish boy. If you take him in and you look after him, after the war, we'll come back and he'll reward you. The reason they did this is because they felt that he had a higher likelihood of survival. So when he told me the story, he broke down. My father said, if we're going to survive together or none of us. He didn't agree. And they stayed together in a bunker. He showed me pictures of a Polish family that he went to visit, who saved his entire family. He showed me pictures. He went to see them in Poland, and they I don't know if the same people were alive, but the children, and of course these Jews are very wealthy, and they looked after these Yidden, these Poles, these Goyim, and I was praising the Goyim who saved Jews during the Holocaust, naturally, right? In Yad Vashem, they're called Chsidiyum Esaylam. Chsidiyum Esaylam means a guy who does reveal good. This doesn't include Chsidiyum Esaylam. Because Chsidiyum Esaylam have a nefesh from Klipa, so by them this Taiv also exists. He said they all did it for themselves. He's not very forgiving of everything and everybody. He's a very interesting human being. But he said they do it. I don't think it's possible to say that about all the Goyim, because some of them lost their lives saving Jewish people, many of them. But this is how he felt. He felt, listen, don't tell me. I was saved by Polish Goyim. I know exactly what the score is. But okay, my point is not to bring up a negative, but to bring up how complicated it is. But a Goy who was from the Chasidei Umas Ha'elam, his guf, his klip is negatake, which means a Goy who is from Chasidei Umas Ha'elam has the same teva of a Yid of Rachman as the Gmil Chasadim we described before. How does a guy who is not a chassid become a chassid is a complicated question, and how does it happen, and who helps him, and does he need help? These are questions for great scholars. But stam hagoy is from Shar Klippus Meis. It doesn't mean they don't do kindness. It means that they want something back for it. Right? Shekol Okidisa Gemara. The Gemara says the same thing as the Kabbalah says. Al Posek v'Chesed L'Umem Chatos. The kindness of the nations is a sin. How could you say the kindness of the nations is a sin? They did a kindness. So the Gemara Shekol Stoka v'Chesed L'Umem Sa'ela Mason. The kindness that Goyim do, Ein Elolis Yar V'Chulu with the boast. Now, how terrible is it to do an act of kindness and want a little covered? How terrible is it in kindness and want a little recognition? It's not so terrible. Well, the Rebbe has an Igeres HaKedesh, which he wrote Samach as Manos Tal Kusay, that focuses on Chesed She'eina Shalemes. The Eibishter created a world for reciprocal kindness. So the Teretz says, you're right, it's a wonderful thing. But it's not Kedusha. It's Klipa. When a person does kindness because they want that kindness in return, no one is going to say that that's a bad thing. What we're discussing in Tanya, this is Pnimiyas HaTeira. Good in the world of Pnimiyas HaTeira has to be non-reciprocal. It has to be ideal. An act of kindness with no return. And this is the Teva of Nefesh HaBahamas of a Yid. Okay, there's one more word. I'm not going to explain it, but mitzvah next time, which is not going to be for a while. When we get back to the Tanya, we're going to start paying ways. I don't want to do more Perikaf. The Alter Rebbe says the Lashon Shebeteva Kol Yisrael B'Tel Deisa. Right? The nature of a Yid from birth. Why does he have to say both words? Obviously, you're born with a nature. And part of the answer is, obviously, on the high end, your nature from birth you can improve upon. But the nature from birth you can also corrupt. The Alter Rebbe discusses this as it's explained in Chutzah Shamayim and Tanya Perek Ches. There's a Teva Betulga, there's a nature from birth. The nature is Klipa, but it's Klipas Nega, and you can corrupt it. You can go lower than your Teva Betil Dasi. We'll get to it on a later occasion. Okay, so we finished Perek Aleph. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe I get to this in later chapters, but the Rachmanis and Gemilas Chasadim from the godly soul, is that expressed completely differently, or is expressed just more of it? Is expression different in the godly soul? Or does it have a different?
I can't answer that question. But let me complicate it for you. In other words, I'm going to give you an answer that you're not expecting. Right? Avraham Avinu had a nature of kindness. And the Eibishter tests him 10 times. The last of his 10 tests is to take his own son to the Akedah, which is the epitome of Gevurah. He was 140 years old. When he comes back from the Akedah, the Eibishter says to Avraham Avinu, Ata Yedaiti, now I know ki yerei lekemata, that you don't only love me because that's in your nature, you also fear me, which is against your nature. In other words, the animal soul has kindness, but only kindness. One of the things the Chassidus talks about Avraham Avinu with great praise was the fact that if he gave you food and you wouldn't pray to God, he made you pay. Why? Because that was against his nature. His nature was to give. He was a giver. He needed to be kind. He needed to help people. You can't say about Avraham Avinu Chas V'Shalom codependency. It was his neshama. But to say, you don't want to pay, this was for him the greatest establishment. So this is the difference. Mitzad the Nefesh HaBahamis, you could have altruistic kindness, but you can't have altruistic severity. Mitzad the Neshama, there could be a blend. The kindness has to be more, in other words, it's more complicated. It's the other way. Okay, we'll take a break and we'll do Hayem Yem. We'll take a break, we'll do Hayem Yem. Mamash a minute. Okay.